Do you trust an algorithm with the power to launch nuclear weapons? I'm guessing your answer is probably not. Welcome to yet another episode of Bill Track 50 Beyond the Bill Number. I'm your host, Sarah, and with me to talk about the Block Nuclear Launch by Autonomous Artificial Intelligence Act of 2023 is Stephen. Stephen, how are you?
Hi, Sarah. Great to be here.
Before we dive into this really interesting bill this week, I wanted to ask you if you have any fun plans coming up.
Yeah, well, it's funny you should ask that because at the moment here in England, it's exam season.
Mm.
All kids age 16 are taking a common set of exams across like nine different subjects, very important for their future. And my daughter is 16, and so she's taking her exams this year. So it's a very, very important year for her. But she's been working incredibly hard over the past sort of few months, really, by preparing for these exams and now taking like dozens and dozens of high stress exams. So as a reward, we said when her exams are finished, and they finish on Friday, we're going to take her to anywhere in the world that she wants to go.
Okay.
So where do you think she chose? A 16-year-old girl can go anywhere in the world. Where do you think she would choose?
Mm, Paris.
Paris would be a good one. We actually went to Paris last year, so not that one. New York, you got the
Yeah.
Bahamas,
Oh, yeah,
beaches,
anywhere.
mountains,
Yeah.
all of that,
Hmm.
anywhere at all. But no, she chose to go to Stockholm. So that's where we're going next year. Next week.
Oh,
We're going to
wow.
Stockholm. We're going to tour the all the canals and explore the
Oh, very
city, go and see all
cool.
the Viking ruins, and learn a little bit about
Ooh.
Sweden. Really. What
Heck
about
yeah.
yourself? What are you doing?
I actually am headed to Durango, a big mountain town. It's actually a small mountain town in Colorado, but with a big reputation, this weekend for my best friend's little sister's wedding. So I'm really excited. My husband and I are going to go mountain biking a little bit beforehand.
Excellent.
We've kind of gotten back into mountain biking, and he's like used to be a big skateboarder, and he is a good biker, but he hasn't ever really mountain biked because he's from Texas
Mm.
and he's really trying to become an expert. And I'm like, can we just go out and have fun? And he's like, let's do the hardest things. And I'm
Mm.
like, okay,
Well,
we're jumping right
I
back
would
in.
wish you good weather and say I hope it doesn't rain on you, but as it's in Colorado, obviously you
Right.
always have good weather, so it's pretty much a
Yes.
done deal, I would say.
Okay, okay, enough about our fun lives. Let's get down to the business. Nuclear launching.
Yes. To start this topic this week, then I think we do need to start by discussing the apocalypse, Armageddon, nuclear annihilation, whatever you'd like to call it. And the best way to start this, of course, is to talk about the classic 1983 movie War Games, where Matthew Broderick accidentally hacks into a NORAD supercomputer, almost triggering a nuclear holocaust, as you do. As a self-confessed younger person, then I'm guessing it's a little bit before your time.
Sometimes when you make these references, I just smile and wave. But I think what we're talking about today is actually a little bit more iRobot is the speed that where my mind is going.
No?
But didn't War Games end with like the supercomputer, kind of like iRobot, understanding that some scenarios have no winners and humanity's kind of a little bit messed up anyways, and teaching us that, certain games shouldn't be played by machines and some are best not played at all.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's a very good synopsis. It's a great film, by the way. If you haven't seen it, highly recommended. If only for the very amusing 1980s computer graphics, which are less than overwhelming.
It is amazing how some of the CGI holds up from back in the day. Looking at today, it seems like Congress is heeding at least some of this lesson. And this block nuclear launch by Autonomous Artificial Intelligence Act is making headlines right now. What's the core aim of this bill?
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely attracted some interest. We've got a lot of views on Bill Track 50, and of course, you can read all about this by looking at the blog with links to all the bills that we'll talk about. The bill aims to prevent AI from having the final say on nuclear launches. It prohibits the use of federal funds for launching a nuclear weapon via an uncontrolled autonomous weapon system, as it calls it, and insists that humans must have meaningful control over such decisions.
And this isn't the only legislation that's addressing new technology and weapon systems. Are there any other kind of related bills that are interesting here?
Yes, there are. I mean, at BuildTrack 50, we just introduced a similar bills feature where you can click a button on any bill and it will show you all of the bills that are similar. So doing it on a bill like this one, which is quite an odd bill, really produces some interesting results. So, for example, you've got S1186 stroke HR 669, sort of companion bills, which mandate that a preemptive nuclear strike can only be authorized if Congress has formally declared war, which is interesting and quite eye-opening, really, because it presupposes that the president of the day, whoever that is, would be willing to launch a preemptive strike under any circumstances. So preemptive, obviously, is using nuclear weapons when they haven't been first used by the enemy.
Hmm.
So again, let's see whether that one passes. Another interesting one is a New Hampshire bill, actually, which is HB 1599, which authorizes the use of autonomous AI for personal defense, which sort of conjures all sorts of RoboCop scenarios into your mind. And I'm not sure that New Hampshireites would be completely relaxed with the thoughts of killer drones patrolling the streets. But who knows?
They were worried about pizza being delivered by drone a while ago, and here we are back to the American
Imagine
way.
missiles being delivered by drones. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, back to AI controlled missiles. Like everywhere in the world these days, we've been talking a lot about AI recently. And, we had our coverage about the US trying to prohibit deepfakes from being used in elections. Even here at Bill Track 50, we've added AI generated bill summaries. Check them out if you haven't. But, the idea of AI controlled nukes is really terrifying and honestly to me more terrifying than a human controlled one. And I feel like, back to our movie references earlier, Hollywood has really played up the fears with movies like Terminator and, iRobot, War Games, all of this. But in reality, is AI truly as terrifying as it kind of seems in this Hollywood context?
Well, it's a valid concern, Sarah. Hollywood has dramatized it, and obviously they're very exaggerated risks, but the risks are there and they're real. AI misinterpreting data, making a wrong call, or something like that can lead to catastrophic consequences. The potential for millions of deaths and sort of global annihilation really is too severe to leave to an algorithm and not worry about.
Speaking of kind of catastrophic scenarios, in
Hmm.
the blog, you mentioned Annie Jacobson's book, Nuclear War, a Scenario. And there were some really interesting insights there. Do you have anything that you'd want to share from her research specifically?
Sure. I mean, I should probably at this stage confess my fascination, from a morbid fascination with the end of the world. I love anything to do with nuclear war, zombie apocalypse,
Mm.
climate apocalypse, all of those kind of things. I don't know why, for some reason, I find it fascinating. So I came across this book, and it's very timely, really, in terms of reading this bill, because the book is basically taking a sort of second by second analysis of what would happen in a particular war. The
Uh-huh.
scenario is that North Korea launches a missile against Washington D.C. Not very pleasant,
Oh.
and it takes it through a sort of second by second scenario of what would happen. And spoiler alert, like the world ends after about 10 minutes, because it's within about an hour. That was it. The world was over, because that's how
Wow.
long it takes. So it was a very interesting, fascinating book, but one that you shouldn't read if you ever want to be able to sleep at night again. One in chilling detail from the book is that the president only has 6 minutes to decide whether to launch a retaliatory strike after the detection of an incoming
Oh my
ICBM,
gosh.
which is detected sort of instantly, really, which is a staggeringly short time to determine if it's a real alert or if it's false, and then to actually make that decision to effectively end the world. The president has to do that. So you just need to think for a second, do you trust either Joe Biden or Donald Trump to make that call? Depending on which side of the political fence you stand on, you might have concerns about one or both of those two people
Hmm.
actually making that call. So an AI would be able to make the call dispassionately. It would be able to analyze vast amounts more data. It wouldn't get emotional about it. It wouldn't panic. And so there's theoretically, it would be able to make a better decision, because it can analyze a massive data in the blink of an eye and so on. But there's also a risk that it would act too quickly for human intervention, and obviously it would be cutting out that sort of human are we sure we want to do this type question? Because
Hmm.
the AI probably wouldn't ask that question.
Well, and I mean, 6 minutes, I can't even pick where I want to eat sometimes in 6 minutes for the day,
Exactly.
and that's the trials and tribulations of being an adult, feeding yourself.
Mm.
But, it seems like there's maybe a point here where we could use AI to grab information, but then, we'd always kind of maybe want a human looking at it. And it just seems like this is
Exactly.
a lot of stress and a monumental
Mm.
decision. Like there must have been near misses.
Oh yes, definitely. So the book details some of them. Again, which is another sort of fascinating bit of the book because Jacobson has delved into all of these newly declassified documents and so on, really skirting the edge of what you're actually allowed to talk about. Because obviously this is all highly secret.
Yeah.
But one of the things that she dug up is in 1979, a simulation tape was mistakenly inserted into a NORAD computer. It was quite a
Oh
basic
yeah.
computer at the time, and this computer started running this simulation, and analysts actually believed at that time that it was a real Soviet attack.
Oh my
And it was
gosh.
the middle of the night. There was one guy on duty at that time, and he's looking at his screens, all these missiles coming over. And what he should have done was pick up the phone and call President Carter, but he didn't. He investigated further and quickly determined that it was actually a false alarm, and obviously he didn't need to sort of push the panic button. And that human intervention that an AI might not have made likely
Hmm.
prevented that disaster.
That is both fascinating and terrifying. I
It
do
is.
feel like, yeah, I mean, there's so much missed here with AI of it is just data and it's not necessarily making a call, it's evaluating an ending and
Mm,
evaluating an answer, I guess, not an ending. I mean, ending with
mhm.
this, but ending of the world. But
Yes.
like I feel like it may have not been prevented altogether if there was AI, right?
Well, I mean, it's a really crucial question, isn't it? The AI might respond wrongly if a mistake is
Mm-hmm.
made, but would the AI have actually made that mistake in the first place? Because they do tend to be human errors. It was a human being who put the wrong tape into the computer.
Mm-hmm.
So it might have avoided the issues, but it might also not have had the intuition to actually double check. And it underscores the need for a human oversight and that final decision point to be made by a human being. And obviously, in the case of America, that human being is the president of the United States, who is the only person who has the
Mm-hmm.
authority, unless things go really bad and there is no president anymore, the only person who has that authority to actually push the metaphorical button, because as we all know, there isn't really actually a button, which is quite disappointing, but there is.
Yeah, I feel like the first issue is honestly to me just about how much we as a population, especially Congress, understands the impacts of AI and what are the capabilities of our society and where it should be and what parts it should, help us with and other parts that it should stay very, very far away from.
Yeah.
And, like in iRobot, looking at what AI did to Will Smith's world, like here
Mm,
we are, And then you also look at war games, and the supercomputer was understanding that there's no winners. And I don't
yeah.
know if our Congress has fully understood and embraced the lesson and the severity of not letting AI do too much within our society, especially when it comes to things like literally nuclear war.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the bill is a significant step, and you have to say that it's probably the right thing to do. It doesn't really address the root issue of nuclear weapons themselves. Another sort of fascinating and terrifying bit of the book is that in 1983, the U.S. military and civilian command ran a highly classified set of war games known as the Proud Prophet War Games. And what they did is they ran different nuclear scenarios. So every day all of these key senior people within the administration turned up to work. They were presented with an envelope with a particular scenario in, and they then acted as they would if that scenario was actually happening. They called the same people. They made the same things happen. And each day was a completely different scenario. Some quite big scenarios, oh, there's a million missiles on the way. Others just like one rogue missile, one rogue bomb, or whatever. But the interesting thing about the war games was that every single scenario ended in exactly the same way, which was global annihilation,
Hmm.
regardless of where it started. Sort of showing that
Okay.
once you push that button, there's no turning back. There's no such thing as de-escalation.
Hmm.
It always ends the same way. And eerily, of course, these war games in 1983 took place in exactly the same year that the movie War Games was released. And the movie itself reached the same conclusion as the actual experts conducting this top secret military operation in the same year. Is that a coincidence? Is it art imitating life, life imitating art? Difficult to know. I mean, obviously, nuclear war was on everyone's minds back in '83, so perhaps it is just a coincidence.
Or maybe it's just everybody understands the human condition
Yeah.
instead of just ensuring that it's a real human finger on that button. I feel like Congress should just focus on eliminating the nuclear threat altogether.
Exactly, exactly. So while human oversight is crucial, the ultimate goal should be disarmament of some kind. And we've come so close in the past. There have been various stages when, particularly back in the days of the Soviet Union, the America and the Soviet Union came really close to agreeing to get rid of pretty much all of these bombs. And there were some successful ones. Obviously, the number of missiles in the world dramatically decreased, particularly after during the 90s. But it's going back up again now. Everyone's
Mhm.
building new bombs, and the threat seems to be getting sort of worse and worse again. So it is time to really look at disarmament again, and let's see if we can come up with some new treaties to actually address the main problem.
Oh man, this has been an enlightening discussion. Thank you everybody for tuning in to our Doomsday podcast this week. And don't forget that you can find our podcast anywhere you find podcasts, as well as our videos on TikTok and YouTube. Until next time, I think I'll learn a lesson from Matthew Broderick and go play a nice game of chess.
Always a safer choice. Thanks very much, Sarah.